My wife swore I was paranoid. Now, I'm not sure I know who I married. I never thought I'd be the guy posting on Reddit. For years, I'd read stories here and think, how do people miss the signs? Or, how does a marriage get that bad without someone noticing? Now I'm sitting alone in my living room at 2 a.m. staring at divorce attorneys' websites and wondering how I became one of those stories. I'm 34. My wife, Rachel, is 32. We've been married for 6 years and together for almost 10. Up until a few months ago, I would have described our marriage as solid. Not perfect, but solid. We owned a house together. We had a dog. We took vacations. We argued about normal married couple stuff like chores, money, and whose turn it was to call the plumber. Nothing dramatic. Then things started changing. At first it was small stuff. Rachel became glued to her phone. Not in an obvious way. It wasn't like she was constantly texting someone in front of me. It was the opposite. Every time I walked into a room, she'd lock the screen. Every single time. I noticed it enough that one night I joked, "What are you hiding? State secrets?" She immediately snapped, "Maybe I just want privacy." The reaction caught me off guard. I laughed it off, but it stayed in my head. Then came the overtime. Rachel worked in marketing, and suddenly her company was apparently in a permanent state of emergency. Late meetings, weekend projects, client dinners, networking events. Every excuse sounded reasonable on its own. Together, they started sounding rehearsed. One Friday, she told me she'd be working until midnight. At around 10, I ordered takeout and decided to surprise her by dropping off dinner at her office. I know, looking back, I wish I had listened to my instincts right then. When I arrived, the building was almost completely dark. The security guard at the front desk looked confused when I mentioned Rachel's name. She left around 6. I remember standing there holding a bag of food while my stomach dropped. I called her immediately. No answer. I texted. No answer. 20 minutes later, she called back. She sounded irritated. "Why are you blowing up my phone?" I told her I was at her office. There was a pause, a long pause. Then she laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not an embarrassed laugh. I mean laugh. "Oh my God, are you seriously checking up on me now?" I explained what the security guard had said. She instantly had an explanation. Apparently she'd left the office to meet a client. Apparently her phone battery had died. Apparently I was overreacting. Apparently I was acting controlling. By the end of the conversation, somehow I was apologizing to her. That should have been my first clue. Rachel had a talent for that. She could take a situation where she was caught doing something suspicious and somehow make me feel guilty for noticing. The next few weeks were more of the same. Every question became an argument. Every concern became proof that I didn't trust her. Every inconsistency had an excuse. And there were always inconsistencies. One day she'd say she was having dinner with coworkers. The next day she'd tell the same story but mention entirely different people being there. When I'd point it out, she'd accuse me of keeping score. Then something happened that I couldn't explain away. One Sunday morning, she left her smartwatch charging in the kitchen. She was upstairs in the shower. The watch lit up. A message appeared. I wasn't trying to snoop. I just happened to glance at it. The preview showed only 6 words. "Last night was worth the risk." That was it. No name, no context, just those 6 words. I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. A minute later, the notification disappeared. When Rachel came downstairs, I asked who had texted her. Her face changed instantly. For a split second, less than a second, I saw it. Panic. Then it was gone. She rolled her eyes. A coworker. What coworker sends messages like that? Another eye roll. "You're being ridiculous." I pushed harder. She got angry, then furious, then offended. Then suddenly she was crying. Within 10 minutes, she had somehow transformed from a suspicious wife into a victim of my trust issues. I ended up sleeping on the couch that night. The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Something was wrong. Very wrong. What I didn't know yet was that the smartwatch message was only the beginning. 3 weeks later, Rachel's own parents would show up at my front door with information that would completely destroy everything I thought I knew about my marriage. And that's when the real nightmare started. The next 3 weeks were torture. I know some people are going to ask why I didn't leave immediately after the smartwatch message. The answer is simple. I wanted proof. Not because I needed proof to justify leaving. I needed proof because Rachel had spent years making me doubt my own judgment. Every time something looked suspicious, she had an explanation. Every time I caught a contradiction, she had another explanation. Every time I questioned her, I somehow became the bad guy. After a while, you start wondering if you're losing your mind. So I told myself I'd stay calm and pay attention. That lasted about 4 days. The lies started piling up so quickly that I could barely keep track of them. One evening, she claimed she was having dinner with 3 female co-workers. A few hours later, she accidentally posted a photo to social media. Not a group dinner, not co-workers, just her and a guy I'd never seen before. The photo disappeared within minutes, but not before I saw it. When I asked about him, she didn't even hesitate. "Oh, that's Ethan. He is a client." The confidence in her voice almost convinced me. Almost. Then she added something strange. "Actually, everybody was there. They just weren't in the picture." It sounded like something she made up on the spot. I let it go, at least outwardly. Inside, I was spiraling. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating properly, started checking the clock every time she left the house. I hated the person I was becoming. Then things got even weirder. One Saturday morning, Rachel announced she needed to attend a weekend marketing conference 2 hours away. Apparently, she'd forgotten to mention it. Apparently, she'd known about it for months. Apparently, she'd be gone overnight. When I pointed out that she'd never mentioned a conference before, she got annoyed. "Not everything revolves around updating you on my schedule." Then she left. The entire thing felt wrong. Every instinct I had was screaming at me, but I still had nothing concrete. Late that evening, while I was sitting at home trying not to lose my mind, someone knocked on my front door. I opened it expecting a delivery driver. Instead, I found Rachel's parents standing there. Her father looked furious. Her mother looked like she'd been crying. For a second, I thought something terrible had happened. An accident, a medical emergency, something like that. Then her father said something I'll never forget. "We need to talk about Rachel." My stomach immediately dropped. I invited them inside. Nobody sat down right away. They just stood there awkwardly in my living room. Finally, her mother broke the silence. "How much do you know?" Those 6 words changed everything. I remember staring at them. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. "Know what?" Her father clenched his jaw. Then he pulled out his phone. "Your wife is lying to you." The room felt like it tilted sideways. I honestly thought I might throw up. "What are you talking about?" For several seconds, nobody answered. Then Rachel's mother started crying again. That's when I knew. Whatever was coming next was going to be bad. Very bad. Her father handed me the phone. I looked down at the screen. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Then the image came into focus. It was Rachel. She was standing outside a restaurant, laughing, holding hands with a man. Not a coworker, not a client. Holding hands, like a couple. The photo had been taken less than an hour earlier. The date and timestamp were visible. I stared at it, then stared some more. My brain refused to process it. Her father looked away. I took that picture myself. I couldn't speak. I genuinely couldn't. The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Finally, I managed one question. "Who is he?" Her mother wiped tears from her face. "We think it's the same man she's been seeing for months." Months? That word hit harder than the photo. Months. Not one mistake. Not one bad decision. Not one drunken night. Months. I felt something inside me break. Then came the biggest shock of all. Rachel's parents already knew exactly who the man was, and they'd been trying to stop the affair for weeks. Apparently, Rachel had become careless. She'd introduced the guy to relatives as a friend. She'd brought him to family gatherings when she claimed she was working. She'd lied to everyone, not just me, her parents, her sister, her cousins, everybody. And when her parents confronted her, she doubled down, denied everything, then accused them of being controlling. The same playbook she'd been using on me. The same lies, the same manipulation, the same fake tears. That's when her father looked me directly in the eyes and said, "There's something else you need to know." And what he told me next made the affair look like the least shocking part of the story. I don't think I've ever felt as sick as I did in that moment. Rachel's parents were sitting across from me. Her mother looked devastated. Her father looked like he was holding himself together through pure anger. And I was sitting there staring at a photo of my wife holding another man's hand. A photo I never should have seen. A photo that confirmed every fear I'd been trying to talk myself out of. Then her father said there was something else. Something worse. At that point, I honestly assumed he was about to tell me she'd been sleeping with multiple men, or that she was planning to leave me, or that she had secretly emptied our bank account. My imagination couldn't come close to the truth. He unlocked his phone again, opened another photo, then slid it across the table. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. It appeared to be some kind of document. Then I noticed my name, my signature, my address. My stomach immediately dropped. "What is this?" Neither of them answered right away. I kept reading. The blood drained from my face. It was a loan application, a very large loan application, one I had never seen before, one I had definitely never signed. My hands started shaking. "Why does this have my signature on it?" Rachel's father looked disgusted. "Because she forged it." For a few seconds I genuinely thought I had misheard him. What? She forged your signature. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because my brain couldn't process what I was hearing. Well, her father nodded. Ness, apparently one of Rachel's cousins worked at a financial institution. A few weeks earlier, he'd seen paperwork connected to Rachel. The signature immediately looked suspicious. When he checked older documents, it became obvious something wasn't right. Rachel had submitted financial paperwork using a forged version of my signature. Multiple times, I felt like I couldn't breathe. The affair was horrible. But this was different. This wasn't just betrayal. This was fraud. And according to her parents, it got worse. Much worse. The loan wasn't for household expenses. It wasn't for home repairs. It wasn't for emergencies. The money had disappeared. Nobody knew exactly where it went. But there were rumors. Lots of rumors. According to several relatives, Rachel had been spending enormous amounts of money recently. Expensive gifts, luxury weekends, fancy restaurants, hotel trips, things that absolutely didn't match her salary. Or I sat there staring at the paperwork while my entire marriage replayed itself in my head. All those overtime shifts, all those mysterious business trips, all those late-night client meetings. Suddenly everything looked different. Every memory felt contaminated. Every explanation she'd ever given me felt fake. Then her mother quietly said something that made my chest tighten. We didn't want to believe it. She started crying again. We kept defending her. Her father nodded. We thought maybe you were having problems. Maybe there was another explanation. He looked ashamed. But we've been watching her lie to everyone for months. For the first time that night, I realized how much this was hurting them too. They weren't protecting their daughter. They were protecting me from her. That thought was almost impossible to comprehend. Most parents would have covered for their child, made excuses, blamed the spouse. Not these two. They looked genuinely heartbroken. Then her father reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. I was hoping I wouldn't have to give you this. My stomach sank again. The man had already destroyed my reality 3 times in one evening. I wasn't sure I could handle a fourth. I opened the envelope. Inside was a hotel receipt. A recent one. 2 guests. 1 room. 3 nights. The names printed on the reservation were Rachel's and the man from the photograph. Not coworkers, not clients, not friends. A couple. A very obvious couple. The receipt was dated during a week Rachel had told me she was attending a professional training seminar. I remember looking at it and feeling strangely calm. Not because I was okay, because the shock had become too big. There was no room left for emotion. Just numbness. Cold, empty numbness. Then my phone buzzed. All 3 of us looked at it. The screen lit up. Rachel, calling. The timing was so absurd it almost felt scripted. Her mother whispered, "Don't tell her we're here." I answered. The second I heard Rachel's voice, something felt off. She sounded nervous, almost panicked. "Hey," she said. "Where are you?" I frowned. And a long pause. Then she asked a question that made every alarm bell in my head go off. "Has anybody come by the house tonight?" I looked at her parents. Neither of them moved. I suddenly realized something. Rachel didn't know they had told me. Duh! And judging by the fear in her voice, she was terrified that they had. That's when I decided not to confront her. Not yet, because for the first time since this nightmare started, I had something I never had before. The truth. And if Rachel thought she was still controlling the story, she was about to make a very, very expensive mistake. Looking back, answering that phone call was the moment everything changed. Up until then, I had been reacting to suspicious behavior, reacting to lies, reacting to evidence. For the first time, Rachel didn't know something that I knew, and that completely shifted the balance. I looked at her parents. They remained silent. Rachel was still waiting on the phone. "Has anybody come by the house tonight?" She repeated. I forced myself to sound normal. No, the relief in her voice was immediate. Way too immediate. "Oh, okay." Then she laughed awkwardly. "I was just wondering." A lie, an obvious lie. She wasn't wondering. She was checking whether her parents had exposed her, checking whether her secret life was still safe, checking whether she still had control. The conversation lasted maybe another minute before she hung up. The second the call ended, her father shook his head. "She's scared." I agreed. For the first time in months, she had a reason to be. The 3 of us stayed up until almost 3 in the morning, and that's when I learned something that completely rewrote the timeline. The affair hadn't been going on for months. It had been going on for over a year. A year. I remember staring at Rachel's father as he said it. I genuinely thought he was mistaken, but he wasn't. Apparently, several relatives had noticed strange behavior long before I had. Family events where Rachel disappeared for hours. Phone calls she'd take outside. Weekend trips that nobody could verify. stories that never matched, different versions depending on who she was talking to. Her lies were so frequent that relatives had started comparing notes, and the stories never lined up. One cousin had been told she was attending a conference, another was told she was visiting a friend, another was told she was helping with a work project, all on the same weekend. I felt stupid, completely stupid. How had everyone seen pieces of this except me? Then her mother said something that stuck with me. You trusted her. Simple, brutal, true. You don't spend 10 years preparing for betrayal. You trust the person you're married to. That's the entire point. Eventually, Rachel's parents left. Before leaving, her father handed me copies of everything. Photos, receipts, documents, screenshots, enough evidence to fill a small folder. I barely slept that night. The next morning I called in sick to work. Then I started reading every document, every screenshot, every receipt. By noon I had discovered another lie, then another, then another. At some point I stopped counting. The most shocking part wasn't the affair. It was how casually she lied. About everything. Big things, small things, things she didn't even need to lie about. It was like dishonesty had become second nature. Then around 2 p.m., I found a screenshot that made my blood run cold. It was a text exchange between Rachel and the other man. Most of it was flirting, inside jokes, glance, the kind of messages you'd expect. Then I saw my name. I wish I hadn't. I really do. One message from him said, "Does he suspect anything?" Rachel's reply came seconds later. "He is clueless." I stared at those two words for a long time. Clueless. 10 years together, 6 years married, and that's how she described me. Not husband, not partner, not someone she once loved, just clueless. A useful idiot, an obstacle, something disposable. I don't know why that message hurt more than the hotel receipts, but it did. Maybe because it showed what she really thought of me, not what she pretended to think, the truth. By that evening, I had reached a decision. I wasn't going to have an emotional confrontation. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to give her another opportunity to manipulate me. I wanted facts. So I called a lawyer, then another, then a financial advisor, and what they found over the next 48 hours nearly gave me a heart attack. Because the forged loan wasn't the only financial surprise Rachel had hidden from me, not even close. In fact, compared to what came next, the loan was just the appetizer. The real disaster was sitting in our joint accounts, waiting for me to discover it. The following 2 days felt less like a marriage crisis and more like a criminal investigation. I wish I were exaggerating. I met with a lawyer on Tuesday morning, a calm, older woman who had clearly seen every kind of divorce disaster imaginable. I brought the folder, the photos, the receipts, the screenshots, the loan documents. She spent almost an hour quietly reading everything. Then she looked up and asked a question that caught me completely off guard. How much access does your wife have to your finances? All of it. The expression on her face immediately changed. Not panic, concern, professional concern, the kind of concern that makes your stomach sink. She advised me to pull every financial record I could find, every bank account, every credit card, every investment account, everything. I spent the rest of the day gathering documents. At first, nothing jumped out. A few unusual purchases, some expensive restaurants, hotel charges, luxury stores, things that were bad, but not catastrophic. Then I reached one of our joint savings accounts, and my heart stopped. The account should have contained roughly $48,000. Instead, it had less than $6,000. I checked again, then again, then again. Same number. I actually thought there had to be some kind of system error. There wasn't. Over the previous 9 months, thousands of dollars had disappeared through dozens of small transfers. Not one giant withdrawal. Small amounts, carefully hidden. 300 here, 500 there, 800 somewhere else. Just enough to avoid attracting attention. I started tracing them. The money wasn't going toward household expenses. It wasn't going toward bills. It wasn't going toward anything I recognized. It was simply gone. My hands were shaking by the time I called the lawyer back. She asked me to send everything immediately. Then she said something that made my stomach tighten. Do not confront her yet. The fact that she said it so quickly scared me. What do you mean? Because there may be more. No, there was always more. Every time I thought I'd reached the bottom, another trapdoor opened beneath me. That evening Rachel came home, acting completely normal. Actually, normal isn't the right word. She was unusually cheerful, almost affectionate. She kissed me, asked about my day, made dinner, even sat next to me on the couch. For a brief moment, I felt like I was watching a stranger wearing my wife's face. How could she do this? How could someone spend the afternoon hiding an affair and missing money, then spend the evening pretending everything was perfect? The answer arrived faster than expected. Around 10 p.m., Rachel fell asleep on the couch. Her phone buzzed once, twice, 3 times. I looked. I know people will judge me. At that point, I didn't care. I picked up the phone, and that's when I discovered something that completely blindsided me. The affair partner wasn't who I thought he was, not even close. For weeks, I had assumed he was some random coworker or client. He wasn't. He was someone I knew, someone who had been inside my house, someone who had sat at my dinner table, someone who had shaken my hand, someone who had looked me in the eye while sleeping with my wife behind my back. I felt physically ill. The messages confirmed everything: hotel trips, secret weekends, lies, hundreds and hundreds of lies. Then I saw his name, and I dropped the phone. Literally dropped it. The device hit the floor. Rachel stirred slightly, but didn't wake up. I just sat there staring, trying to process what I had read. Because the man wasn't a coworker, wasn't a client, wasn't even a friend. He was my younger brother's business partner, a guy named Brandon, a man who had attended family barbecues, birthday parties, holiday dinners, a man who laughed with my family, who called me brother, who pretended to be my friend. I thought that was the worst revelation of the night. It wasn't, because while scrolling through the messages, I accidentally opened a conversation from only 3 days earlier. A conversation between Rachel and someone else, someone whose name I didn't recognize. The first message made no sense. The second message made less sense. The third one made my blood run cold. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't sexual. It was about money, a lot of money. And according to the messages, Rachel wasn't planning to leave me. Not yet. She was planning something far worse. Something that would have completely destroyed me financially. And if I hadn't picked up that phone that night, she probably would have gotten away with it. I barely slept that night. Actually, that's not true. I didn't sleep at all. I spent the entire night sitting in my home office, staring at screenshots on my laptop while my world continued to fall apart one piece at a time. The conversation I'd found wasn't between Rachel and Brandon. It was between Rachel and a financial consultant, or at least someone presenting themselves as one. At first glance, it looked innocent. Questions about assets, property values, joint accounts, debt obligations, basic financial stuff. Then I kept reading, and the context became horrifying. Rachel wasn't asking how to save money. She wasn't asking how to improve our finances. She was asking how to protect herself while leaving me with as much damage as possible. I wish I were exaggerating. One message read, if everything is in both names, how much can he realistically recover? Another, would it be smarter to move funds gradually before separation? And another, what usually gets overlooked during divorce proceedings? I remember physically leaning back from the screen, like creating distance from the words would somehow make them less real. This wasn't an impulsive affair anymore. This wasn't someone making selfish decisions and lying to cover them up. This looked planned, calculated, strategic. The lawyer's warning suddenly made perfect sense. There was more, a lot more. The next morning, I forwarded everything to her. She called me less than 30 minutes later. The first thing she asked was, have you confronted her yet? Oh, her tone told me that was the correct answer. Then she explained something that made my stomach drop. People preparing for divorce sometimes become careless. They start researching, planning, moving assets, creating paper trails, and sometimes those preparations become evidence. The lawyer wanted every screenshot, every document, every receipt, everything. By noon, I had uploaded over 200 files. I wish I could say things slowed down after that. It didn't. At around 3 that afternoon, my younger brother called. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same younger brother whose business partner was sleeping with my wife. I almost ignored the call. Thankfully, I didn't. The second he heard my voice, he knew something was wrong. What's going on? I hesitated. Then I told him. Not everything, just enough. The silence that followed was immediate. Then Brendan? His voice sounded genuinely shocked. Not fake shocked, not performative shocked. Actually shocked. I explained the evidence, the photos, the messages, the hotels, everything. For several seconds he didn't speak. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. Come over. I drove to his office. The entire trip I was preparing myself for disappointment, for excuses, for loyalty to his business partner, for some version of there must be a misunderstanding. Instead, I walked into the biggest plot twist yet. My brother looked furious, not at me, at Brandon. Apparently Brandon had been acting strangely for months, missing meetings, taking unexplained trips, being secretive about his schedule. lying about where he was. My brother had assumed it was another relationship. He just never imagined it was my wife. Then he opened his laptop and showed me something neither of us expected. A company expense report. Several company expense reports. Tours, hotels, restaurants, thousands of dollars. And Brandon had listed many of them as business expenses. My brother's face turned white as he scrolled, because several dates matched the hotel receipts Rachel's father had given me. Exactly. The affair wasn't only affecting my marriage. It appeared Brandon had been charging parts of it to the company. My brother looked like he wanted to put his fist through a wall. Then he made a decision, one that would change everything. He called Brandon, right there, in front of me, put the phone on speaker, and calmly asked where he was. Without hesitation, Brandon answered, meeting a client. My brother looked directly at me, then asked, what client? Another lie, another detailed explanation, another story, and every single word was false. Because at that exact moment, Brandon wasn't meeting a client. We knew where he actually was, because 10 minutes earlier, Rachel had texted me. She said she was staying late at work, and she'd accidentally sent a photo she deleted almost immediately, but not before I saw it. A photo that showed a hotel room my brother recognized instantly, because it was the same hotel Brandon had claimed not to visit in months. The room number was visible, the timestamp was visible, and for the first time since this nightmare began, we had both of them caught in the same lie at the exact same moment. What happened next would blow the entire affair wide open. If you'd asked me a month earlier whether I'd ever participate in exposing my own wife's affair, I would have laughed. Yet there I was, sitting in my brother's office, listening to Brandon lie through a speakerphone, watching evidence pile up faster than either of us could process it, and somehow, things were about to get even crazier. When Brandon ended the call, my brother immediately made another one, this time to someone I didn't know, a friend who worked at the hotel chain's regional office. Before anyone asks, no, nobody illegally accessed guest records, but the friend did confirm something important. The hotel was hosting a private corporate event that week, meaning there were security cameras everywhere. Entrances, lobbies, parking areas, elevators, the entire place was covered. My brother hung up and looked at me. We don't need more proof. He was right. At this point, we already had enough evidence to sink a battleship. The affair was real. The lies were real. The financial issues were real. But something in me wanted certainty. No more gaslighting. No more excuses. No more alternate explanations. I wanted the truth standing in daylight where nobody could deny it. Then my phone buzzed. Rachel, another text? Working late. Don't wait up. I stared at the screen. My brother stared at the screen. Then we both started laughing. Not because anything was funny, because the lie had become absurd. At that exact moment, she was probably sitting in a hotel room with Brandon, and she was still trying to maintain the illusion, still following the script, still pretending. Then another message arrived, this one from Rachel's father. Need to call you. Important. I stepped outside and dialed immediately. The second he answered, I could tell something was wrong. Very wrong. Where are you? He asked. I told him. That? Stay there. My stomach dropped. What happened? There was a pause. Then, Rachel just came to our house. I froze. Apparently Rachel had shown up unexpectedly about 20 minutes earlier, and according to her father, she wasn't there for a casual visit. She was there because she knew people were talking. She knew something was slipping, and she was trying to get ahead of it. The story she told her parents was unbelievable. Literally unbelievable. According to Rachel, I was emotionally abusive, controlling, obsessive, paranoid. She claimed I had become unstable, that I was stalking her, monitoring her, accusing her of affairs that didn't exist. Her father sounded disgusted recounting it. She wanted us to believe you were the problem. I felt physically sick, even after everything, even after getting caught. She was still building lies, still creating a narrative, still preparing an escape route. Then came the part that stunned me. Her parents hadn't argued, hadn't confronted her, hadn't revealed what they knew. Instead, they let her talk for nearly an hour, and Rachel kept talking. The more she talked, the worse it got. According to her father, she contradicted herself repeatedly, changed timelines, changed details, changed stories. At one point, she accidentally claimed she had been somewhere she couldn't possibly have been, a mistake her mother immediately noticed. Rachel corrected herself, then changed the story again. It was like watching someone drown in their own lies. Eventually, she left, but not before saying something that chilled me, something her father repeated word for word. If he ever finds anything, don't believe it. People can fake screenshots. I remember closing my eyes, because that sentence told me everything. He knew, maybe not everything, but enough. She knew evidence existed, and she was already laying the groundwork to discredit it. Then her father delivered one final piece of information that hit harder than anything else that day. Rachel wasn't planning to come home that night. She had told her parents she was staying with a female coworker, a coworker her mother had already spoken to, a coworker who is currently out of state, meaning Rachel had told yet another lie without realizing it could be verified. At this point, the deception had become almost compulsive. Then my brother came outside. His face looked pale, not angry, pale, the kind of pale people get when they've just seen something terrible. "What happened?" I asked. He looked at me, then handed me his phone. A new message had arrived, not from Brandon, not from Rachel, from someone neither of us expected, a woman named Ashley, Brandon's wife, and attached to the message was a screenshot that changed the entire situation. Because Brandon hadn't been cheating on just one spouse, he'd been cheating on two, and Ashley had evidence that neither of us had ever seen before. I stared at the message from Ashley for a solid 10 seconds before opening it. I knew who she was. Not well, but enough. She and Brandon had been married for 4 years. We'd met at cookouts, holiday parties, a few birthdays. She always seemed kind, polite, the type of person who remembered everyone's name and asked how your parents were doing. The idea that she was now involved in this nightmare felt surreal. My brother opened the message. The first line was simple: "I think we need to talk." Then came the screenshots, dozens of them, maybe more. And unlike the evidence I already had, these messages covered a much longer period. Much longer. I felt my stomach drop as I scrolled. The affair hadn't been going on for a year. It had been going on for almost 2 years. 2 entire years of lies. 2 years of fake business trips, fake meetings, fake conferences, fake emergencies. 2 years of secret dates, hotels, gifts, and deception. I honestly thought I was going to be sick. Then Ashley called. My brother handed me the phone. Her voice sounded exhausted, not angry, not emotional, just exhausted, like someone who had finally reached the end of a very long battle. "I found out 6 months ago," she said. That sentence stunned me. 6 months? Ness. Apparently she'd suspected Brandon for a long time. Unlike me, she had confronted him early. And unlike Rachel, Brandon wasn't particularly good at lying. He'd slipped up repeatedly, changed stories, forgotten details, contradicted himself. Ashley had quietly started collecting evidence. Photos, messages, financial records, everything. The reason she contacted us now was simple. She'd finally reached her limit. Then she said something that made the room go silent. "There's another person." I looked at my brother. My brother looked at me. Ashley continued. "There has always been another person." At first, I thought she meant another affair partner. I was wrong. Very wrong. The other person was someone helping Rachel and Brandon hide the affair. Someone close to both of them. Someone who provided alibis, covered for them, passed messages, warned them when people became suspicious. A helper, an accomplice. And according to Ashley, this person had been involved almost from the beginning. The betrayal somehow got worse. Adam, I asked who it was. There was a pause. Then Ashley gave us the name. For a second I thought I'd misheard, because the name made absolutely no sense. It wasn't one of Rachel's friends. It wasn't one of Brandon's co-workers. It wasn't anybody either of us expected. It was Rachel's best friend, Nicole. I had known Nicole almost as long as I'd known Rachel. She'd been at our wedding, given speeches, visited our house dozens of times, sat across from me at dinner and asked how work was going, all while helping my wife cheat. I felt numb. At this point, it was becoming impossible to keep track of the betrayals. Ashley wasn't finished. She began sending more screenshots, one after another, then another, then another, each one worse than the last. Messages discussing cover stories, messages coordinating lies, messages mocking spouses who were too trusting. I wish I hadn't read that part. One message from Nicole read, "Honestly, they'll never figure it out." Rachel responded with a laughing emoji. Then, especially my husband, I remember staring at that screen until the words blurred. Not because I was crying, because my eyes couldn't focus anymore. This wasn't just cheating. This wasn't just lying. They had turned it into entertainment. A game. Something funny. Something to laugh about. Ashley eventually stopped talking. The silence lingered. Then she said something unexpected. Something none of us saw coming. "I want to help you." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath. "Brandon thinks I'm flying to my sister's house tomorrow." There was a pause. Then, "I'm not." My brother slowly sat down. I felt my heart pounding again. Ashley continued. "He's meeting Rachel tomorrow afternoon." Another pause. Then the sentence that changed everything. "And I know exactly where they'll be." For the first time since this nightmare began, we weren't reacting anymore. We weren't chasing evidence. We weren't uncovering old lies. We knew where they would be. We knew when they would be there. And for the first time, Rachel and Brandon had absolutely no idea what was coming. What happened the next day would become one of the most chaotic afternoons of my entire life, and it would end with police officers arriving somewhere nobody expected. The next morning felt strangely calm. Too calm, like the atmosphere before a tornado hits. Nobody talked much. Not me, not my brother, not Ashley. By that point, we'd all been running on stress, anger, and almost no sleep for days. We had one objective: get the truth into the open. No screaming matches, no dramatic ambushes, no violence, just facts. Cold, undeniable facts. Ashley told us exactly where Brandon planned to meet Rachel, a luxury apartment complex on the other side of town. Not a hotel, not a restaurant, an apartment. Apparently, Brandon had been borrowing the unit from a friend who traveled frequently for work. According to Ashley, he'd been using it as a private meeting place for over a year. I wasn't even surprised anymore. At noon, the four of us met in a coffee shop parking lot. My brother, Ashley, and unexpectedly, Rachel's father. When he arrived, he looked furious. Apparently, Rachel had spent most of the morning calling family members, trying to get ahead of whatever she thought was happening, trying to shape the story before facts could catch up with her. According to him, she'd already started telling people that I was becoming unstable, that our marriage was falling apart because of me, that she was afraid of what I might do. The accusations made me sick, but they also confirmed something important. She was scared. People who think they're winning don't launch preemptive damage control campaigns. People who think they're losing do. Around 1:30 p.m., Ashley received a message from Brandon. A simple one. Meeting ran long. See you later. A lie. Because 10 minutes later, she received another message. A pocket dial voicemail. Completely accidental. The recording lasted only 8 seconds. But it was enough. Brandon's voice. Rachel's voice. Both laughing. Together. At the apartment. Ashley saved it immediately. Then she looked at me. Read it? No, I wasn't ready. Not even close. But I nodded anyway. We drove separately. The apartment complex was modern and expensive. The kind of place where people expected privacy. The kind of place where nobody expected their secrets to explode. Ashley knew which building, which floor, which unit. Apparently, she'd learned far more than Brandon realized. We entered the lobby. My pulse was hammering. Every step felt heavier than the last. Then something happened that nobody expected. Before we even reached the elevator, a woman approached us. Mid-30s, professional looking, clearly upset. She looked directly at Ashley, then at me, then at my brother. You're here because of Brandon, aren't you? We froze. Apparently, we weren't the only people investigating. The woman introduced herself. She was the owner of the apartment, the actual owner, not Brandon's friend, the real owner, and she looked furious. As it turned out, Brandon had lied to her too. He'd told her he needed occasional access to the apartment for business meetings. Instead, he'd been using it for the affair. She'd recently discovered what was happening through security notifications and building records. She was already preparing to revoke access. Then she asked a question that stunned everyone. Did you know he was bringing other women here too? Ashley looked like she'd been slapped. The rest of us just stared. Other women? The owner nodded. She had security footage. Different dates, different visitors, not just Rachel, multiple women. The silence was unbelievable. Even Ashley looked shocked, because apparently Brandon had been lying to everybody, not just his wife, not just me, not just Rachel, everyone. Then the situation exploded. Literally seconds later, an elevator opened, and out walked Brandon, followed immediately by Rachel, both laughing, both relaxed, both completely unaware of what they were walking into. The moment they saw us, everything stopped. The laughter vanished. The color drained from their faces. Rachel looked at me, then her father, then Ashley, then my brother, then back to me. For one brief second, nobody spoke. The silence felt endless. Then Rachel did what Rachel always did. She lied, immediately, instantly, without hesitation. But before she could finish her first sentence, something unexpected happened. 2 police officers entered the lobby, and every single person in the building suddenly turned to look at Brandon. Because the officers weren't there by coincidence. They were looking for him. To this day, I can still picture the look on Brandon's face. 1 second he was walking out of the elevator with my wife. The next second he was staring at 2 police officers moving directly toward him. At first I thought maybe someone had called in a disturbance. Maybe a security. Maybe the apartment owner. Maybe a misunderstanding. Then one of the officers said, "Brandon Miller," and Brandon immediately went pale. Not nervous, not confused, Pale. The kind of pale that tells you somebody already knows exactly why the police are there. The entire lobby went silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The officers asked him to step aside. Brandon tried to act casual, tried to smile, tried to ask what this was about. It didn't work. One officer informed him that they needed to discuss a complaint involving company finances. My brother slowly turned toward me. Neither of us said a word, but we were thinking the same thing. The expense reports, the fake business trips, the hotel charges. Apparently, somebody had already started asking questions. The officer didn't arrest him. Not then, but it was obvious this wasn't a friendly conversation. Meanwhile, Rachel was looking around like a trapped animal. Every exit was blocked. Not physically, socially, emotionally. There was nowhere left to run. Ashley was standing there. Her father was standing there. I was standing there. The apartment owner was standing there. Everyone she had lied to was suddenly in the same room. Then Rachel opened her mouth and somehow made everything worse. Instead of apologizing, instead of admitting anything, instead of showing even a hint of remorse, she pointed at me and said, "He's been stalking me." The entire lobby stared. I couldn't believe it. Even now, I have trouble believing it. She had been caught walking out of a secret apartment with another woman's husband, and her first instinct was to accuse me, not explain. Adios? The apartment owner immediately shut that down. She calmly explained that the building's security records showed Rachel entering the apartment dozens of times. Over many months, Rachel tried another story, then another, then another. Each one collapsed faster than the last. At one point, she claimed she was there for work. The apartment owner asked what kind of work required overnight visits. No answer. Then she claimed Brandon was helping her with a business project. Ashley pulled up romantic text messages. No answer. Then she claimed everyone was misinterpreting things. At that point, even strangers in the lobby looked embarrassed for her. The lies were falling apart in real time. Then came the moment that finally broke her composure. Her father stepped forward, not angry, not yelling, just disappointed. I've never seen disappointment hit someone so hard. He looked directly at her and said, "I don't even recognize you anymore." That was it. Not the affair, not the evidence, not the police, not getting caught. That sentence shattered whatever confidence she had left. For the first time all day, Rachel stopped talking. She looked away, her eyes filled with tears, and for a brief second, I thought she was finally feeling remorse. I was wrong, very wrong, because moments later she whispered something that stunned everyone. She blamed me. She claimed our marriage made her unhappy, that she felt trapped, that she deserved better, that she had no choice, as though somebody had forced her into 2 years of deception, forced her into forged signatures, forced her into hidden accounts, forced her into hundreds of lies. Even her father looked horrified. Then Ashley dropped the final bombshell, a bombshell none of us, not even Rachel, saw coming. Ashley had hired a forensic accountant weeks earlier, quietly, without telling anyone. And according to the accountant's report, money wasn't just missing from my accounts or Brandon's accounts. There was another victim, a very wealthy victim, someone Rachel and Brandon had both been exploiting, someone who had just discovered the truth and who was already preparing legal action. The second Rachel heard the name, she completely lost her composure. Because unlike me, unlike Ashley and like her parents, this was someone she was genuinely afraid of. And what that person revealed the next day finally brought the entire scheme crashing down. By the time I got home that night, I felt emotionally numb, not angry, not sad, not even shocked anymore, just exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that settles into your bones after weeks of stress. I sat in my kitchen staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours earlier. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Family members, friends, messages, calls, questions, rumors. Apparently word had spread faster than any of us expected. People talk, especially when two families suddenly discover they've been lied to for years. I ignored most of it. I simply didn't have the energy. Then the next morning arrived, and with it came the biggest surprise of the entire story. The wealthy victim Ashley mentioned wasn't a business investor, wasn't a client, wasn't some stranger. It was Rachel's grandmother. My stomach dropped when I learned the truth. Rachel's grandmother, Alina, was one of the sweetest people I'd ever met. She was in her 80s, sharp-minded, independent, generous to a fault. She adored Rachel, absolutely adored her. For years, Alina had treated Rachel like the center of her world, and apparently Rachel knew exactly how to use that. According to the forensic accountant, large amounts of money had been moving from accounts connected to Alina. Not enough to trigger immediate alarm, but enough to add up over time. At first, everyone assumed Alina had willingly helped her granddaughter. Then the documentation surfaced, and everything changed. Several transfers had been authorized using instructions Alina never gave. Other transactions had been disguised as investments. Some paperwork contained signatures that experts immediately questioned. The deeper investigators looked, the uglier it became. I remember sitting in the lawyer's office when the report arrived. Nobody spoke for several minutes. Even the lawyer looked stunned, because this wasn't just infidelity anymore. It wasn't even just financial deception. It was a pattern, a long pattern. A pattern of manipulation targeting anyone who trusted her. Then came the final twist. The twist nobody saw coming, especially Rachel. Alina wasn't confused. She wasn't unaware. She wasn't helpless. Months earlier, she'd started noticing inconsistencies. Small things. Numbers that didn't add up. Statements that seemed strange. Excuses that sounded rehearsed. Instead of confronting Rachel immediately, Alina quietly hired professionals. Accountants, attorneys, investigators. She wanted certainty. She wanted facts. And she'd been collecting them for nearly 6 months. 6 months! While Rachel believed she was fooling everyone, her grandmother had been building a case, piece by piece, document by document, evidence by evidence. When I learned this, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. The one person Rachel considered easiest to manipulate had actually been the smartest person in the room. Then Alina made her move, and it was devastating. She updated her estate plans, removed Rachel from positions of responsibility, terminated access to various financial arrangements, reported questionable transactions, and began cooperating with attorneys. Legally, methodically, thoroughly. The fallout was immediate. Suddenly, Rachel wasn't just dealing with a collapsing marriage, or a public affair, or angry relatives. She was facing consequences she never anticipated. Real consequences. The kind that can't be explained away with tears or excuses. The kind that don't disappear after a carefully crafted story. Then something happened that surprised me more than anything else. Rachel called me, not to apologize, not to confess, not to ask how I was doing. She wanted help. After everything. After the lies. After the affair. After the financial betrayal. After trying to destroy my reputation, she wanted me to help her. The conversation lasted less than 3 minutes, but what she said during those 3 minutes revealed more about her than our entire marriage ever had. And that phone call ultimately made my final decision very easy. The phone rang just after 8 p.m. I already knew it was Rachel. She'd been calling all day. Voicemails, texts, emails, even messages through relatives. For the first time in weeks, she sounded desperate. Not angry, not defensive. Desperate. I answered. There was a long silence before she spoke. Then, please help me. Those were her first words. Not I'm sorry. Not I hurt you. Not I made a mistake. Just, please help me. I sat quietly and listened. For almost 3 minutes, Rachel talked. She talked about how stressed she was, how overwhelmed she was, how everyone had turned against her, how her family wasn't supporting her, how Brandon wasn't answering calls, how lawyers were contacting her, how her grandmother refused to speak with her, how unfair everything felt. The entire conversation revolved around one person, Rachel. Not once did she ask how I was doing. Not once did she acknowledge what she'd done to me. Not once did she express genuine remorse. Then came the sentence that changed everything. The sentence that finally ended the marriage in my mind. She said, "You know I'm not a bad person." I remember staring out the window, listening to the silence afterward, and suddenly something became very clear. For weeks, I had been waiting for accountability, waiting for honesty, waiting for the woman I married to finally show up. She never did. Instead, every conversation revolved around consequences, not actions. Consequences. She wasn't devastated because she betrayed people. She was devastated because she got caught. That realization lifted a weight from my shoulders. Not because it made things hurt less, because it removed all uncertainty. I finally had my answer. I calmly told her I would be proceeding with the divorce. There was another long silence. Then she cried. Then she argued. Then she blamed me. Then she begged. The same cycle I'd watched for months, maybe years, but this time it didn't work. Because I wasn't confused anymore. The call ended, and with it, so did the marriage. The divorce process wasn't easy. No divorce involving that much deception ever is. But eventually everything moved forward. Lawyers handled what lawyers handle. Accountants handled what accountants handle. The truth handled the rest. As for Brandon, my brother ended their business partnership. Ashley filed for divorce. And from what I've heard, Brandon's life became a mess of legal and financial problems almost overnight. As for Rachel, the last update I received came indirectly through relatives months later. Apparently, she'd spent a long time trying to convince people that she was the victim. Some believed her, most didn't. The evidence was simply too overwhelming. The lies had finally caught up with her. Ironically, the people she hurt the most became the people who showed me the most kindness. Her parents checked on me regularly. Her mother called just to make sure I was eating. Her father helped me move during the divorce. And Alina, her grandmother, sent me a handwritten letter. I still have it. One line from that letter stays with me. Character is revealed when telling the truth becomes expensive. I've thought about that sentence a lot, because in the end, this story wasn't really about cheating. It was about character, about integrity, about who people become when nobody is watching. For a long time, I blamed myself, wondered what I missed, wondered what I could have done differently. The truth is simpler than that. Trusting your spouse isn't a mistake. Loving someone isn't a mistake. Believing the person you married isn't a mistake. The mistake belongs to the person who abuses that trust. If anyone reading this is going through something similar, here's my advice. Pay attention to actions, not words. When someone's story changes every week, notice it. When evidence and explanations don't match, notice it. When someone constantly makes you question your own reality, notice it. Most importantly, don't confuse love with blindness. Love requires trust. Blindness requires denial. They're not the same thing. Today my life looks very different than it did a year ago. Quieter, smaller, more peaceful. The strange thing is that losing the marriage wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was losing the version of reality I thought I lived in. The good news? Reality, even painful reality, is still better than a beautiful lie. And that's where my story ends. Thanks to everyone who read it. This is the end of the story. Don't forget to share with your friends, comment, like, and subscribe.